Hello, hello, gorgeous ladies. Good morning. When you come on this morning, do say hello. Let me know that you're here. Let me know how you're doing this morning. And welcome to, hello Michelle. Welcome to part 2 of the Tina Codes, the masterclass. You may like to grab yourself a notebook and a pen or a brew so that we can nest in together and delve into the second part of this class. Good morning, Beatrice. And I'm just going to do a little recap for those of you who are joining this morning to bring you up to speed so that even if you were not here yesterday, it's okay. You can always watch the masterclass from yesterday later. It's all good. So yesterday we looked at the life of Tina Turner as a map for understanding how the 3 archetypes of the goddess, the badass and the boss function, both when they are activated, as in the second half of her professional life when she had regained her own professional freedom, and what those archetypes look like in the shadow manifestation, i.e. in her case, the first half of her professional life when she was with Ike, and how that impacted her goddess, badass, boss archetypes and her own access to their magic, which was massively suppressed because the external boss in her life, i.e. her husband, wanted to have total control and power over her. So we're using Tina's story as a kind of exaggerated version of what can happen when those 3 archetypes are somehow suppressed or disowned or working in the wrong order, so that we can better understand what happens in our own lives when these 3 parts of ourselves, that we're not actually working with them consciously, right? The point of this class is to start to see how they work and bring them into our conscious awareness so that we choose how we work with them. So Lucy and Beatrice, you were both here yesterday, so welcome back. And the homework questions that I invited you to look at were, what are the shadow bosses playing out in your life? And we talked yesterday about how a shadow boss can be a person, an external person in your life. It could be your mother-in-law. It could be your ex-husband. It could be one of your kids. It could be your manager at work, right? It can be anyone in your life that you give your power away to or you give your energy away to for unfair recompense. Okay? That's the definition of a kind of misaligned boss. A misaligned boss in your life can also look like a belief that you have. We talked about that yesterday, which you're giving your power and your energy away to. So, for example, if you have a belief that it's impossible to be a successful coach on the internet because there's so many of them already, then you're giving your power away to that belief, right? That belief then becomes one of your misaligned bosses because it's telling you what you can and can't do and it's suppressing your power. We also talked yesterday about how perfectionism is a shadow boss, because when we try to be perfect, we are inevitably setting ourselves up to fail, right? We're never going to deliver the perfect masterclass. We're never going to be the perfect partner to somebody. We're never going to be the perfect mother. So whatever we make ourselves a slave to, whether it's a person or a belief or a projection onto ourselves, is a shadow boss. So one of the invitations yesterday was to reflect on who or what are or have been the shadow bosses in your life. And feel free to share in the comments if you have had any realizations about that. The second question that I invited you to feel into for the homework was, is your badass i.e. the part of you that gets things done, running around in circles all the time, doing things for other people, left, right and centre, but just about keeping head above water, treading water, never really feeling like you're actually building anything? Or does your badass feel like she's building conscious bricks, you know, placing bricks consciously in order to build a house, as a metaphor, in order to build a business, in order to build a legacy, in order to build a portfolio of work, in order to build passive income so that you don't have to keep running around like a headless chicken all the time, right? So that was the badass question. And the goddess question was, in what ways are you suppressing your own goddess? The goddess is the part of you that expresses emotion, that speaks her truth, that shares her artistry with the world. And we talked yesterday about how what can happen a lot in childhood is that the goddess gets suppressed, the magical child gets suppressed, the part of us that is very strong and characterful and knows what we want and knows what we don't want and expresses her magic and is wild in her imagination. For most of us, that part got squashed by the school system or just by the system in general. And the badass was generally enslaved to working to please others, right? If you do your homework on time, you will be rewarded. If you're a good girl and you do what your mummy and daddy want you to do, you'll be rewarded. So as adult women now, the reality is that most of us have a strong badass, i.e. we're working hard to please people or to get jobs done or to try to be efficient and effective. But most of the time what we're actually doing is just about treading water, keeping our head above water. We've lost the spark of the divine connection with the goddess because that was suppressed in the childhood years when we lost connection with the magical child. And we gave our power away to other people, i.e. our parents and our teachers and so on. And therefore we lost our connection to the boss, right? So that's more or less what we covered yesterday. And if any of you have any insights about those things that I've just talked about, then please do share with me in the comments, because it really helps me if I can see which parts of this you might be resonating with, in what ways you've given your power away unconsciously. Once we start to make that conscious, we start to heal it, right? So it's super helpful to share about these things as we're going along. And so yesterday we looked at Tina's first marriage as a kind of a petri dish for a very profound soul expansion journey that she went on through that marriage and beyond, right? She referred to it as a deeply karmic connection that she had with her first husband. And her first husband was almost like a caricature of like the worst type of boss that you could possibly manifest, right? Because he was aggressive, he was violent, he was hyper controlling, he exploited her, he ridiculed her, he deprived her of basic access to money and, you know, made her work like a slave basically without any recompense other than hoping that he wouldn't be violent with her, right? And that was her reality for 16 years. So that played out for her for a long period of time in her life. And as many of us sometimes, when we find ourselves in situations that are not right for us, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a set of circumstances that we don't feel we're choosing, sometimes it can take a really long time to evolve beyond that situation, right? Everything has a natural timeline to it. So I shared with the group yesterday that many people asked Tina why she stayed so long in that marriage if it was so oppressive. And her response was that she needed to heal at a soul level whatever it was inside of her that had been a vibrational match for that type of relationship. It's like it needed to play out on its own timeline. It's like her soul needed to experience, what does it feel like to be so massively disempowered for such a long time before the pendulum could swing in the opposite direction and she could finally find the fire inside of herself to reclaim her power, right? So Abraham Hicks calls this manifesting contrast material. In other words, sometimes we manifest things in our lives that don't feel good in order to eventually decide that we've had so much of the thing that we don't want, i.e. so much neglect or so much solitude or so much abuse or so many relationships that don't feel satisfactory or such a long time being in a poverty consciousness around money, for example, that eventually something pivots us in the opposite direction. And that's exactly what happened with Tina's story. Okay? So we're going to pick up now from the point in her life on her timeline where something inside of her just decided enough is enough is enough. So they were in Texas. This was in the late 1970s. And they were in the back of a car on the way to a hotel to do a gig that night. And she was wearing a white Yves Saint Laurent trouser suit, right? Ike offers her some chocolate. The chocolate is melting, and as he passes it to her, the melted chocolate goes on the white suit. And she literally just kind of goes like, you know, just kind of tuts because there's chocolate on her suit. And that's enough to send him into an absolute rage. So he starts hitting her in the car, in the back of the car. But this time, instead of just taking it, as she'd done for so many years and just playing small and hoping that he would stop, she actually, for the first time, started to physically fight back. And that's how her soul began to show that she was energetically saying no more to this. By the time she got out of the car, the suit was covered in blood. She was a complete mess. They checked into the hotel. She gave him a head massage, which was part of their little ritual to help him to relax before they had a show. So she did that as normal, as if nothing was weird. And as soon as he dropped off to go to sleep, she felt this, like she felt her heart just absolutely pounding. And she knew that that was the moment she was going to find her escape, right? So she grabs her bag, terrified she's going to bump into some of his kind of like cronies that are all dotted around the hotel, goes out the back door, through the back of the kitchen, hides behind some bins because she's terrified he's going to find her. Across from her, there's this huge freeway. You know, those like big American freeways that have got like 10 lanes. Her heart's pounded, her nose is broken, like she's covered in blood. And without even thinking, she notices that there's a hotel on the other side of that freeway, right? So she literally runs onto the motorway. And there are these huge trucks coming towards her. And she's dodging these massive trucks. They're all honking on the horn, thinking, who is this crazy woman taking the, you know, literally taking her life in her hands to get to the other side? And she just keeps going, keeps weaving between these tankers. Like literally she's in Texas and there's like 10-ton trucks approaching her from every direction. And by some miracle, she makes it across the other side of the freeway. And she checks into the hotel. She goes to the reception. She says to the guy behind the reception, bear in mind this is during a time in America where there's a lot of segregation still. The guy in the hotel is white. Obviously, she's black. So she's not even sure how he's going to respond to her, right? She goes in, blood all over the suit. And she says, my name's Tina Turner. Bearing in mind, she's famous by this point, right? She's already done world tours with the Rolling Stones by this point. She's already had hit records by this point. And she says, I've got 36 cents in my pocket. I can't pay you for a room tonight. But if you let me have a room, I swear I'll pay you back as soon as I can. Right? Thank God the hotel manager was a nice guy. He was like, of course, he could see she was in a mess, so he sent somebody up with some soup. The next day she calls a solicitor and she says, I need you to get me on a flight out of here. And she goes into hiding because she knows that Ike's going to look for her. And for several years, he threatened her and he did all kinds of things to try and scare the shit out of her so that she'd come back. But she'd made that decision the day that she took her life in her hands on that highway. She had made that decision that she was going to run for her freedom no matter what. No matter what. And that decision, where she literally took her life in her hands, maps onto what Piccola Estes, the author of Women Who Run with the Wolves, calls the life-death-life cycle, right? Sometimes we have to literally, not literally, but metaphorically risk death in order to take a chance on a new life, right? And that's exactly what Tina did on that day. She decided that the life that she had with her ex was so miserable and so unfulfilling, and her soul had reached a point where being in this slave identification was like intolerable. So she was willing to risk death in order to make her bid for freedom. And as he told her, you will come into this marriage with nothing. You will leave this marriage with nothing. So she left with nothing. And when she divorced him, she said to the attorney, I don't want anything from him. The only thing that I want is my name, Tina Turner. I want to keep my name. Why? Because her internal boss archetype knew that the stage name Tina Turner was her ticket to phenomenal success and wealth, because that name already had a currency to it, right? So once she had found her freedom from him, she started to build back from zero. She had less than zero because he had left her with a huge amount of debt for cancelled concert venues and things like that, because she was the one that divorced him, right? So the onus, the financial onus, was on her to pay those fines. So he left her not only with destitute, but with huge debts. So what Tina did was, she immediately got her own badass into motion again. But this time, her badass was no longer a slave to an external boss, right? She was now the boss. Tina was now the boss. So her badass started, you know, taking all kinds of small-time gigs, because initially, because she was no longer part of the Ike and Tina review, she had to start again. She had to establish herself as a solo artist. Initially, people weren't interested in her as a solo artist. They were interested in her as part of the established band, right? So she had to do all kinds of like low-ticket gigs, slightly seedy nightclubs, you know, TV appearances on quiz shows that even her kids like took the piss out of her for like stooping to that. But her badass was like, I'm going to build back no matter what, right? I am going to build back no matter what. So slowly but surely, she started to pay off all those debts. And eventually, she managed to get herself a manager, but this time it was a manager of her own choice, right? So her boss, when you think of a manager, you think the manager's the boss. But in her case, she appointed a boss, i.e. Roger Davis, to work for her in the way that he could hold the same creative vision that she had for herself with her, right? So that's a completely different frequency to the energy of Ike as the boss, i.e. the controller, the oppressor, the abuser, right? In the second half of her life, where she went solo, she manifested a much younger guy as her manager. He was only in his early 20s at the time, but she already could see that he was talented, right? And he could see her potential. when a lot of people couldn't. And a lot of people were saying to her, you know, you're the wrong side of 40, love. You know, you're a woman. In those days, you know, in the sort of early 80s, being a female solo artist and also being black and also being in your mid-40s, you know, that was a lot of reasons why a lot of record labels didn't want to engage with her, right? But her manager had the vision, and she, most importantly, had the vision of what she felt she could still do in the world, what she could still do as an artist. She still had that fire in her belly. She knew that the best of her was yet to come, because what people were going to see from her from that point on was the real Tina, the real essence of her musical genius, the real essence of her stage presence, without having to be constantly looking over her shoulder to see if she'd done something wrong and then Ike was going to punish her later, right? So she wanted to find out, who do I get to be as an artist on the stage when I'm fully in my own power, when I have full creative direction over my own music, where I get to choose the songs that I want to sing. I get to use my voice in the way I want to use my voice. I get to be playful with my musicians on the stage without being terrified of what's going to happen to me later, right? So, in other words, she became her own boss. She decided that she was going to be successful. The realm of the vision comes under the boss archetype, right? It's kind of like a collaboration between the goddess and the boss. She knew that she wanted to sell out stadiums. Bear in mind that in the early 80s, no black woman as a solo artist had ever sold out stadiums. That was like the rock bands of the day. That was the Beatles. That was the Rolling Stones. This was like the domain of white men in rock, right? She was a black woman who, you know, most of the industry had decided was a has-been. And yet she was setting her goals and her sights for her own achievement way bigger and way higher than anyone else around her could conceive of. So that's the goddess. Like, she knew, her goddess could see in her mind's eye what she was capable of as a solo artist. And all she needed to do was to hold that vision until a record label eventually said, okay, we'll take a punt on you. They gave her 2 weeks to write the Private Dancer album, which was her 1984 smash hit album. They gave her 2 weeks. They gave her the absolute minimum financial backing to do it. Roger Davis, they were based in London at the time, the manager, he was running around London with cassette tapes in his car, right? Literally just like getting samples from all these different like producers and stuff, and like playing them to Tina late at night and saying, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And famously, when he first played her What's Love Got to Do With It, she absolutely cringed and she was like, oh my God, that's awful. I think Terry Britton wrote it, and she was like, oh, that's dreadful. I'm never going to sing that. And Terry Britton was like, just try it. Just give it a go. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But just have a play with it. So she starts singing it, and she starts trying to find her own beat, her own rhythm, her own like interpretation of the lyrics. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, she's playing with it, and then eventually, boom, she finds her way of singing it and her way of delivering it that feels right for her. And she turns around to Terry Britton and she says, yeah, I can work with it. All right, let's record it. Let's put it on the album. That ended up becoming her like first ever #1 hit single. That was the signature track on the Private Dancer album. The Private Dancer album sold 10 million copies. The record label didn't even sign her as like a full artist contract. They just signed her up on an artist development contract. And they gave her 2 weeks and some crappy old cassette tapes. And she turned that into freaking gold. Because she knew that she had this vast legacy to live out, right? It's almost like, you know, like a champagne cork that's just been like suppressed. And then when she finally broke free of that marriage, it was like the goddess in her, the powerhouse in her just absolutely exploded with this exuberant energy, which had been so repressed in that first marriage and when she was part of that band, that when she finally found her freedom, she was like, I am going to do this my way, on my terms, with my dancers, with my manager that I've chosen, and I am never, ever going to give my power away to anybody else ever again. She got to control everything from that moment onwards. She did the arrangements, she did the vocals, she appointed the dancers, she did the setting, you know, like she took full control over those shows. And they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Nobody could fricking believe it. Like, there would be no Beyonce without the Tina of the 1980s, because she was the one that said, I'm going to smash these records. I'm going to smash these album sales. I'm going to sell out arenas. No black woman's done this before, and I'm going to freaking do it. And I'm going to do it in my mid to late 40s. Yeah, this was the power of the vision that she had for herself. And when we want to build something, when you want to build a business, when you want to build a legacy, this is the energy that we need to be able to tap into is, can you hold the vision for your gifts, even if other people can't see it? Can you hold on to your desires, your dreams, even if you have no evidence that you can manifest them or that it's even possible? Right? It's almost like she used that first 16 years of hell as like rocket fuel for like the next half of her life, right? And she realized that she wanted to manifest a relationship, and she wanted to manifest a husband who was going to be everything to her that Ike was not. So the success that she had commercially with her music, with her solo career, helped her to pay off her debts, helped her to amass money, helped her to become financially independent, enabled her to buy properties that she owned outright that no one else was ever going to be able to take away from her. It enabled her to live where she wanted to live. She wanted to live in Europe. She didn't want to live in America because her fan base in Europe had always been so loyal to her, even when she was kind of like in the in-between stage after leaving the Ike and Tina Review and establishing herself as a solo artist. Like, the European fans just stayed with her the whole time. So she knew she wanted to live in Europe. She knew she wanted to have fun. She knew she wanted to live in London for a while, in Kensington, and live in one of those beautiful Georgian houses. So it was almost like in her 40s, she found the freedom and the joy that was so missing in the early years, in the 20s, right? And in the 30s, when she was living in this hellish relationship and this hellish oppression with her first husband. So part of the healing process for her was absolutely the reclamation of power, boss terrain, and the reclamation of joy, the reclamation of the goddess. That she could own her own homes, have her own homes exactly as she wanted them. That she could host parties when she wanted to host parties. That she could take film roles that Ike would never have allowed her to take. That were fun and enabled her to dress up and like become different characters, because as a child she always dreamed of being a film star, but it never happened. And then again in her 40s she started getting offered these film roles, and she took the film roles that lit her up and were playful. she was offered a part in The Colour Purple, which is obviously a very kind of like serious tale of woe of, you know, a black woman who'd like had a really hard life and a violent relationship and everything. And she was offered the lead role in that film and she turned it down because she was like, that was the past. That was my past life. That's not my future. So the goddess holds the vision for the future. Her vision for the future was playful, empowered, enjoying her life, attracting her soulmate. So even the creative choices that she made with her music, with her film roles, was not to dwell on what had happened in the past, but to leverage into creating the future that she dreamed of. And her Buddhist practice was a very, very pivotal element to her rising up from the first marriage and finding her power again and finding her freedom again. Because by learning to chant, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is the Buddhist chant that Tina Turner learned in the 70s. And to this day, she chants that every single day to find that peace inside of herself. Because she realized that if she could tap in to that expansive space inside of herself, to that calm inside of herself when everything around her during that first marriage was so chaotic and unpredictable and violent and frightening and intense, you know, like if she could tap into a serenity internally, then nobody could take that away. And that would become her anchor. And that's how she connected internally to the goddess. That's how she created such a strong bridge between herself and the divine. So meeting her second husband, who was the absolute antithesis of Ike, the absolute opposite of Ike, was because she'd already made herself a vibrational match for attracting the divine masculine, because she'd already spent years by that point connecting with the divine feminine through her constant prayerful mantra practice. So she put herself on the frequency to meet the man who would finally show her the kind of love that she'd always longed to feel in her life. She realized that that had to happen within first. And that has to happen within for all of us, right? Like we don't become a match to meet a soul-aligned partner if we haven't connected with the goddess within first. That's how it works energetically. The divine masculine then becomes attracted to the goddess that's already been activated internally. So the second husband was every single thing that her heart and soul desired, because she decided she wanted it. She decided she was worthy of it. She decided that in this lifetime, she wanted to experience what it feels like to be revered, to be desired, to be respected by a partner, to be given space to be who she was and the fullest expression of who she was, without trying to control her, without trying to limit her, without trying to repress her. That's because her inner boss by this point was very activated. So she would never have allowed that type of man to enter her energy field. So the type of man who was able to permeate her energy field was the type of man who had no desire to repress any of those things in her. On the contrary, he had the desire to hold space for her to flourish. There was nobody anymore exploiting her sensuality like I could done. So she was free to express it in her own way on the stage, you know, wearing the costumes that she wanted to wear, collaborating with the artists that she wanted to collaborate with. And if you see her collaborations with Mick Jagger, or her collaborations with David Bowie, or, you know, these iconic artists that she had a really strong relationship with all the way from the 60s through to the 80s and 90s, you know, when you see her on stage duetting with them, it's pure joy. Pure joy. because she's free. She's finally free. She's no longer got this oppressive male character controlling her every move. So she gets to flirt. She gets to be outrageous. She gets to dress up. This is all the terrain of the goddess. And the divine masculine partner that she'd manifested was able to hold space for that and to revel in that without trying to limit or control that. And that was the soul relationship that she was able to manifest because she had experienced such intense contrast material of the type of relationship from hell in order to manifest a relationship from a kind of heavenly realm on earth, creating the life, the soul bond that completely filled her cup because she'd already connected with the goddess within. So I found Tina Turner's story. By the way, I can't see any comments at all. So I've got no idea whether you guys are with me, whether you guys are following me. It's bizarre. I can see that some of you are on. I just can't see any interaction at all. Maybe if anyone can just drop a little comment or do some hearts or something just so I can see if it's working. But if not, that's okay. I will just continue. I've got a feeling it's just not working. So I'll have to catch up with comments later if they're there, but it would seem odd that they're not, that there aren't any. So I'm pretty sure that it's not, I'm just not getting them. So this is the deeply inspiring trajectory of Tina Turner. I want you to follow with me the trajectory of her emancipation and how it happened. How it happened was that she discovered a spiritual practice which became an anchor and which activated the self-love, the stillness, the peace, the goddess aspect of herself. That then gave her the inner strength after several dedicated years of practicing Buddhist mantras. That gave her the internal strength that she needed to leave her oppressor. Once she completely extrapolated herself from his power, she was able to reclaim her own power. She was able to become the type of boss to her musicians and her backup dancers and her team that respected them, that honoured them, that developed them, that encouraged them, that taught them, that made rehearsals a joy for them. In other words, she became the aligned boss, the boss who pays her members, her team members generously, the boss who gives them time off, but the boss who also works them hard to get the absolute best from them and sets the bar high. This is an aligned boss. She'd never had that example in her life of an aligned boss, but she learned by the contrast material of how Ike did it, how she didn't want to do it. She kept the same musicians and dancers and managers around her for decades. Why? Because she was a joy to work for. Because she knew the type of boss she wanted to be. She knew she wanted to be a heart-centered boss. A boss that leads from the heart, that leads from love, and also sets the bar high, and also brings joy and fun and playfulness into the workspace in order to give the audience the most incredible experience. Because she knew that if she had that amazing relationship with her musicians and they had that banter and that flirtation and that fun with each other on the stage, she knew that that would radiate out to the thousands and thousands of people in the audience, and that would give them a next level experience. She understood the energetics of the energy exchange that she was engaged in with her audiences. And whenever she was doing arena tours, she used to spend an hour before she went on stage chanting and visualizing the faces of all of the people that were going to come to the concert that night and sending them happiness, sending them love, sending them joy, sending them every single thing that their heart desired. So by the time she came on stage, she had already connected with them in the most incredible way through the heart, through the goddess. And that's what made her performances unforgettable. So many people have said, if you've seen Tina Turner live, you've never seen anyone who has that stage presence that she's got. Because she was already connecting with the people in the audience one by one through her mantra practice, praying for their happiness, praying for their souls to become free, to become joyful in her presence and beyond. So Tina Turner was an incredible alchemist, working with such high frequencies, such transformational things that happened in that woman's life, you know, like she turned destitution into phenomenal wealth. She turned slavery into empowerment. She turned a miserable marriage into a blissful marriage. She pretty much alchemized every single thing that she experienced in the first half of her life that was so challenging into something so magical in the second half. She activated the goddess so she could meet the dream partner, so that she could meet her audience on such a profound level. She activated the boss so that she could become a multimillionaire and finally own her own homes and decorate them how she wanted and live in Switzerland by a beautiful lake, because that's what her goddess desired. Yeah, she had this vision for everything she desired and she simply allowed it to come. This is the realm of the goddess, to have the visions, but it's the boss that has to put the strategy in place. And what happened after she left Ike was that although she was still doing really intense tours and performing to millions of people and on really intense schedules, now she was doing it for herself. She was building her own legacy. She was performing her own music. She was dancing in the way that she wanted to dance, wild and free. Not somebody assaulting her afterwards because she'd missed a dance step. You see the contrast that she manifested? Freaking another level of contrast. So, it's so important, ladies. It's so important that we learn how to fully connect to the goddess inside of us, so that we can have the vision for all of these things that we want to bring to the world. Whatever our gifts are, whatever our soul work is, this is the realm of the goddess. The boss puts in the strategies, translates that vision into the 3D, makes it happen, creates the systems, creates the containers for the courses, the programs, whatever it is that you want to offer. The badass needs to learn to be aligned, i.e. working for her own boss, just as Tina learned to do after she left her oppressor, was to work for her own boss and set her own ways of doing things that worked for her, to allow her goddess to flourish instead of creating that suppression that happened in the first half of her life, right? So these are all the energetic things that I want to share with you on the Goddess, the Badass, the Boss program. The Goddess, the Badass, the Boss program is going to start next Friday, which is the 3rd of February. And I want to try to share with you in like a tangible way what you will actually get from doing the Goddess, the Badass, the Boss, because just let me bring this up, sorry. Because I think when we actually know what we're going to get from something, it helps it to become more tangible. So the first thing that you're going to get from the Goddess, the Badass, the Boss program is to learn how to stop leaking energy from a badass, which is going around in circles, but not actually doing something more strategic. So you're going to learn to get your own internal badass working for your own internal boss, so that everything you do to build your fempire becomes a whole lot more strategic. You're going to learn how to move beyond the energetics of just treading water into actually building something. You're going to learn how to reconnect with the boss. which we're going to map onto the magical child, because the boss really is an extension of the magical child who knew exactly what she wanted, what she didn't want, and she was not afraid to say it and make that clear. So we're going to use the magical child part of you to help you reconnect with the boss, empowered part of you. And I think a lot of us as women have a really kind of negative association with power. So in order to move beyond that, it's so important to reconnect to enjoying a feeling of being empowered rather than being afraid of it. So I'm going to show you on the program how to actually enjoy that feeling of empowerment and how to use it to create the business of your dreams. Yeah. I'm going to show you how to get your goddess to collaborate with your boss, because many of you might have very inspired ideas about things you want to offer, things you want to put out into the world. But for many women, those ideas remain very much in the realm of the spirit world. And sometimes we really struggle with how to actually activate them and make them happen in the 3D. So I'm going to show you how to get your goddess and your boss working together so that your dream projects start to actually manifest in the physical. We're gonna learn how to get the badass to start taking her cues from the boss so that your actions all feel aligned. I'm going to show you how to honor your goddess as the jewel in the crown of the trilogy. Because the goddess is the one who is closest to God. That is the aspect of you who has the highest level of consciousness and who channels all these incredible gifts that I know all of you have, because you're all heart-centered women, entrepreneurs wanting to just get your work out there and get your visions out there. So I'm going to share with you how to really enhance the goddess within you, allow her magnetism to naturally start to radiate out so that you don't need to grab as much and you can just allow things to come to you. And you're going to learn how to work seamlessly with all three of these archetypes so that your business, your entrepreneurial enterprises and projects start to really, really gain momentum and coherence and strategy. Strategy is the key thing that many women in business or women entrepreneurs online are missing. That comes under the realm of the boss. So I'm going to be sharing with you some codes around that so that you can really start to get whatever it is that you want to offer shaped in a much more coherent way. So in a nutshell, that's what we're going to be doing on the Goddess, the Badass, the Boss program. You get a masterclass on the goddess. So we go in detail on that archetype, and we're going to spend a whole week with me giving you lots and lots of different tasks each day to activate your goddess. You're going to get a masterclass on the badass and how to stop leaking your energy everywhere and how to become much more focused. You're going to get a masterclass on the boss archetype so that you learn how to really harness your power and make friends with responsibility and heal, or at least begin to start looking at healing the money relationship. You're going to get a masterclass on the Holy Trinity, so all three of them, and how to get all three of them working together. You're going to get 2 Zoom calls with me where we can do Q&As. You can ask me any questions. You can share with me what's coming up for you on the program and what you're learning and what you need more guidance with. You're going to get one-to-one access to me, voice note support throughout the program so that we can bounce ideas back and forth and we can start to get whatever it is that you want to offer to the world looking more bouncy, more coherent, more organized as a kind of, body of work that you want to put out. And you will also get access to my first ever fairy tale that I've written called Aurora, the Magical Mermaid Who Dives for Pearls, because Aurora embodies all 3 of the archetypes, the goddess, the badass, and the boss. So you're going to get professionally recorded audio of that story, and you're going to have a session with me on Zoom, which is going to be gorgeous, where we're going to look at the story, we're going to discuss the story, we're going to get the codes from the story so that the whole program starts to really come together for you and you start to learn how to work with these 3 archetypes for life. Because once you've learnt it with me on the program, you will always have those codes within you to tap into as you move forward with your business and whatever else it is you want to share with the world, right? So these codes are invaluable. So that's what you're going to get from the program. We've already got 8 gorgeous ladies signed up, which is amazing because I'm only actually opening the doors for people to join officially from today. The full price of the program is £555. For those of you who have done the Tina codes with me and you're feeling a yes to doing it, then the exclusive price available to you to do the Goddess, the Badass and the Boss is £444. And if it's easier for you to do installments, then you can just do 3 installments of £162. And if you want to do pay in full and get an even bigger discount, you get to save £158 if you do pay in full for £397. You'd need to pay at least a deposit by Wednesday if you want to secure your place at those prices. If you want me to send that to you in writing, just so that you're clear on that, or you want to voice note with me, that's absolutely fine as well. And I'm going to drop my Calendly link into the comments here. So if you have any questions about the program, or you want to have like a little 20-30 minute chat with me to check if it's the right match for you, then by all means book in on the Calendly link. And if you know that you want to do the Goddess, the Badass and the Boss, then I would say move quickly on it, because we start on Friday, the early bird closes Wednesday, and like I said, there's already 8 women signed up and I haven't even opened the doors officially until now. So those last few places will go, they will go quickly. So if you feel inside of you that it's a yes, then reach out to me today and let's see if we can get you enrolled so that your place is secured and guaranteed. And I will be so excited to have you on it. It will be a transformational program, no doubt. We're also going to have a lot of fun on this program. And thank you so much for being here today and yesterday and sharing the Tina codes with me. Her life is an extraordinary example of what is possible when we hold the vision for the type of life that we want to live. And we can take her as our spirit animal as we move into the next phase of whatever it is in our life, whatever magic we want to bring. We can use that same energy of using the inspiration of Tina to look at what we want to transform and holding that vision. So once again, I'm really sorry if I've not replied to anything. I can't see any comments, but I will have a look when I come off now. And thank you so much for sharing the space with me this morning. And I look forward to connecting with you on the Goddess, the Badass, the Boss program, for those of you who are continuing with me. I love you. Have a wonderful Sunday, and I will see you very soon. Bye-bye.